In this video, I'm going to show you how to lay out a still life made up of objects with multiple ellipses. Here you see me looking through my viewfinder at the still life that I set up, and I'm figuring out, where I'm going to place it on my page. Now, what I'm also deciding is what will be my unit of measure. And I decide that my coffee cup will be my unit of measure. So as I look through my viewfinder, I decided the approximate place of the coffee cup and the approximate size so that I would be able to fit the entire still life on my drawing. At this point, it's really important to scale that one object that will be used as your unit of measure throughout the entire drawing. Here you see me using a gestural line to lay out the coffee mug. I also included a line of axis through the middle. Now I'm measuring the width of the top of the coffee mug, and I'm going to compare that to the height. And so I'm measuring the width and then comparing it to the height. Now I first measure it on the picture plane, my imaginary picture plane, that I'm looking at when I'm looking at my still life, and then I apply what I learned to my drawing. Here I'm just fixing the curves of the mug a little bit. Then I'm going to measure the minor axis of the ellipse, the short side, and compare it to the major axis of the ellipse, the longer length. And I find that it goes 1, 2, about 3 times. Okay, maybe a little bit more than that. Then what I'm going to do is really adjust my ellipse so that it matches what I see. And I decide I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller. Just a little smaller. So I'm easing the edges in. And you can see I'm holding my fingers stiff, but sometimes I will kind of take my wrist and curve that around for my ellipses. There I'm double checking to make sure that I made my ellipse the correct proportion. Here I'm just fixing the edge of the ellipse. Remember, you don't want to have any pointed edges ever on your ellipses, okay? They should always be that curved shape. Now I'm placing the handle. As I'm placing the handle, I'm doing it in relationship to the top of the rim of the cup, seeing how far down it comes. Then I'm going to really look at the curve of that handle. I'm looking at where it comes in relationship to the bottom of the mug. Then I'm looking at the negative space in between the handle. So I'm staring at the negative space, and that will help me draw the handle. Remember that. If you stare at negative space, it's always going to help you draw the shapes. It's one of the key things to remember when you're drawing. So now I'm going to get ready to place another object. And I'm going to place the canister in relationship to the coffee mug. Now I'm going to measure the height of that canister from the rim of my top rim of my coffee mug up to the top corner of the ellipse. Then I compare it to the height of the coffee mug, and that's about how large it is in relationship to the coffee mug. Everything gets compared to your unit of measure, which in my case is my coffee mug. My entire drawing is going to be done to scale in relationship to my unit of measure, my coffee mug. So once you understand that concept, it's really not that hard to get your whole still life into proportion. But until you really understand that concept and wrap your head around it, you're going to struggle. Now I'm measuring the width of the top of the canister, and I will also compare that, you guessed it, to the height of my coffee mug. So once I do that on my picture plane, I then transfer my measurements to my drawing. That's about how wide it was, and there it is. It looks like I need to make it a little bit narrower. So this is me just easing it in there, a little bit more narrow. Have you noticed I've done this entire drawing with the overhand grip using a light gestural stroke with my movements, okay? So I don't want to get any of those lines crisp and clear yet. There's time for that after you get your layout done. And I know sometimes beginning students don't want to try this gestural drawing because they feel a little bit out of control, but really this is the way we do it. This works really well to get that sense of movement and flow. Here I'm fixing that bottom ellipse of the cup. I had leaned back a little bit and I didn't like it. It looked like it leaned down a little bit on the right side there. I'm just placing in the lines for the major axis as well as the minor axis. And the minor axis goes through the ellipse, but it also is the axis for the entire, entire object, for the cup, or in this case for the canister. Now with the canister, it's got some lines incised on it, and I'm placing those lines in relationship to, you guessed it, my unit of measure, which is the coffee mug. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm figuring out where that's going to go there. I'm just double checking my measurement of the width of the coffee mug. And here I'm just defining that edge, and I'm using that curvy line there. There it's got a little bit of a shoulder to that canister. See how I'm sweeping around there? More ellipses, more ellipses. Now you know why you had to practice all those ellipses. All right, then there's another line. Again, it has these incised squares in the glass. So I'm placing those. Here I'm pulling that straight line down. Again, watch my hand kind of pull it down, and I'm swinging around doing the ellipses. And here I'm doing a little bit more measuring, and I'm measuring the height of the minor axis compared to the major axis of the ellipse, and I find that it goes about 4 times. In other words, it was such a small, tiny ellipse because the ellipses get narrower as they get closer to your eye level. So the narrowest ellipse on my drawing is going to be the wine glass, and then the ellipse I'm working on now of the canister is narrower than the coffee mug. Okay? So I have all that in my mind, all that knowledge is in my mind as I'm drawing, and as I see it, I recognized, oh yeah, that's what's going on there. Now, of course, these ellipses, as they get closer to the top of the coffee mug and further from my eye level, will get a little curvier as they move on down that canister right there. And you can see me kind of swinging my arm around. Now in this video, I decided not to speed it up at all. I really wanted you to see about the pace that I lay out this drawing. And I get the whole drawing laid out in about 20 minutes. But you also have to realize that I've been doing this for over 40 years. Okay, and some of you are just beginning. So it takes a while when you're just learning. You've got to give yourself some time. Now, this is important. Look at that. I'm looking at that angle between the side of the coffee mug and my canister. I draw it right on the paper. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to draw your sighting lines on the paper. Okay, it's very important at this stage of our course that I see that you understand what you're looking at when you're sighting and that you make those notations. Now, I am working on the lid of the canister that I placed on its side, and I'm checking with a horizontal where the bottom of that canister comes in relationship to, fill in the blank, the coffee mug, of course. Okay, so then I drew that horizontal line, and now I'm sketching in the canister, and I want to check the angle of the canister. Now, this major axis is going to be on an angle. Everything else in the drawing was either horizontal or vertical. This is a little trickier. So you may want to try that. Take an object and place it on an angle. And, try drawing that. Because, not all the ellipses you're going to want to draw in your career as an artist are going to be sitting on a flat surface. You're going to run into ellipses that are on an angle. So that's what I'm working on here. And I'm just fixing that edge of the lid of the canister. Now I'm working on the ellipse of the angle. And I'm putting in, it's very important when you have ellipses on angles, you got to get that major axis and the minor axis on. Okay, now I'm measuring the minor axis. Okay, my thumb and the tip of my pencil. Here I'm transferring to the paper. And I compare it to the major axis. Now, it's about half. Okay, So in this case, the minor axis is about half the width of the major axis. And then I'm just adjusting my, the shape of my ellipse to reflect what I saw. And working with that curve, the side of the ellipse, swinging that around there, getting it a little bit darker. See how my hand just keeps swinging around? Yeah, so those ellipse exercises are really super important. There's a straight line. Make sure those two straight lines are parallel. And I'm cleaning it up just a little bit, but I don't want you to erase your sighting lines. But if you need to fix some edges with a kneaded eraser in that edge, I definitely need to fix. Certainly do that. And there I kind of sat back and I saw that that side of the ellipse was a little bit too narrow. So I'm going to fix that, pull that down a little bit further. Good. There we go. That's a little better. When you're drawing, it's always important to either step back or lean back. And when you do that, take a short break from your drawing, look at it quick, and anything that looks to you that's a little bit off, it probably is. So now at the bottom of that canister lid, look how I drew that whole other ellipse all the way through. That's really, really important when you're working, to draw through the shapes that you see. So here I'm just still fixing up that lid a little bit more. Okay, so this is the relationship between the coffee mug and the lid. And I did check that diagonal, and I drew it on the paper right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the placement of the wine glass in relationship to the coffee mug by looking at where the wine glass comes on the side of the coffee mug, and it ends a little bit below the middle line. Now I am looking at the negative spaces between the canister and the side of the wine glass, and of course between the coffee mug and the wine glass. Now I'm looking at the angle between where the canister is and the top right corner of the wine glass, and I'm placing that angle and I'm drawing that sighting line right on my paper. Okay, again, I want you to do the same thing. All right, so that helps me figure out where my wine glass will end. Okay, so now I know where that corner of the wine glass is going to end because I just drew that diagonal. All right, whenever you're drawing any kind of shape that's symmetrical, you've got to get on the central axis. Especially important with something that has like a stem, like a wine glass. So I've got that central axis in there. And now I'm kind of checking it out, sitting back and working on getting the wine glass symmetrical. Here I'm measuring the width from one side of the wine glass to the other, and I'm discovering that I have to bring in the left side a little bit. Now I'm measuring the overall width to the wine glass, and of course I'm comparing it to the width of the coffee cup. Okay, the width of the coffee cup. Again, that's our unit of measure. All right. So now here I am making sure that the right side of the wine glass, watch me swinging around with that curve there, getting that nice and symmetrical, light, loose, gestural line. Okay, so here I'm checking the minor axis in relationship to the major axis of the top of the wine glass, and what I discovered was it's really thin. Okay, and it's so thin because it's almost at my eye level. You can see that the width of the ellipse of the wine glass is even narrower than the width of the canister. All right, now I'm going to block in that French press coffee pot, and the way I'm going to get it to the right size is going to transfer that angle between the top of the wine glass and the top of that little plunger thing on the French press. Now I am looking at the negative space. So in order to block in this French press, I'm looking at the negative space. Now with this French press, when I set it up, I decided that I was going to have the little spout overlap the wine glass just a little bit. But I wanted some space between the bottom edge of my wine glass and the French press. Here I transferred a horizontal line. I discovered that I had my French press basically lined up with my bottom of my coffee cup with a horizontal line. And now I am looking at that French press, and of course I am comparing the width to the height of the coffee mug. So that's what I was doing. Again, using that coffee mug as my unit of measure. So now that I'm pretty secure about the width of my French press in proportion to my coffee mug, I'm just going to place some of those details, the metal parts of the coffee mug. I'm just watch again. See how I pull those straight lines? Pull them down. See my hand? My hand's stiff. Okay, I'm moving my, my elbow or even my shoulders sometimes to pull those verticals right down there. Okay, now what I'm doing is I am looking where the top of the coffee cup is in relationship to part of the French press to see how that lines up. And I'm drawing another vertical on my paper. Look how many siding lines I have on my paper now. So now I know where to place the, that top part, that top rim, that little metal rim of the French press in relationship to my coffee mug. And there, you keep seeing me circling around. Always draw through your ellipses, okay? That's how you're going to get it right. Draw. See, there I go, swinging that arm around there. Always draw through your ellipses. Okay, there's a little spout, and it, curves right on top, overlapping the wine glass. Now, could I have started with the French press and done everything based off of the French press? The answer is yes. I certainly could have done that. Okay? So you can pick any object. I would pick any object that's in the front and that's kind of squared off. Now, for me, it was easier because the cup is a more simplistic shape. So that, that's why I chose the cup to base everything off the cup. So with the French press, I might forget like what exactly I measured. So here I am again, checking out where the top of that French press is in relationship to the wine glass and in relationship to the canister. And then here I'm looking at that angle between the top of the canister and the top of the coffee mug right there. And here I'm placing that vertical. And there's actually literally a vertical in the French press. If you have a French press at home, I highly recommend that for this assignment. It's got the vertical built in, and it's got like all those ellipses. It's got the ellipse of, they're all over the place. Can't even count them. There's so many of them. So it's a great object for this project. Here I am measuring, of course, the minor axis of the of that little stamp thing, I don't know what it's called, that mashes the coffee down, and I compared it to the width. You can see that as I get further away from my eye level, my ellipses get a lot wider. Now it's time to just block in that handle, and I am almost done with my layout. So what am I doing? I'm comparing it to the coffee mug. Of course I am. I'm seeing where it is and how long it is in relationship to the coffee mug. Okay, it goes about there. See how I left that little mark? Shows me where I'm aiming, right? I kind of map things out sometimes just to make sure I'm drawing in proportion. So staring at the negative space, getting that handle on there. Then I decide it's a little bit too long. I move it up a little bit, okay? That's what's important about when you're drawing. You always, make the adjustments as you're working. And there it is. My layout is complete.